On the morning of September 21, 1996, Danielle Howchin, often referred to as Dany, a vibrant 15-year-old sophomore at Belgrade High School, left her home around 11 a.m., seeking solace at a familiar spot after a family disagreement. Dany, standing at 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighing 130 pounds, was wearing blue jeans and a gray sweatshirt that day. She also had a knee brace on her left leg, which was an injury she had sustained while dancing with friends at a street dance weeks earlier. The girl drove her truck to the Cameron Bridge fishing access just a few miles south of town. Dany often visited this location in the past to clear her head or to simply enjoy nature, so she was very familiar with it. On this particular Saturday, however, Cameron Bridge would act as the stage for a horrific crime. As the hours passed and Dany failed to return home, her family grew increasingly worried. Her mother, Cheryl, and a friend decided to search for her. Their first stop was Cameron Bridge, where they immediately made a chilling discovery. Dany's truck was parked in the lot, unlocked and empty. Near the vehicle, they found her water bottle and car keys lying in the middle of a trail, just a few feet away from the truck. It was clear that something had gone terribly wrong. For 2 frantic hours, Cheryl and her friend searched the area, calling out for Dany and combing through the wooded terrain. Eventually, they made the decision to contact the authorities. At around 5 p.m., approximately 6 hours after Dany had left home, the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office was notified of her disappearance. Law enforcement quickly mobilized, with the search and rescue team joining the effort. Volunteer searchers also arrived at the scene, eager to help find the missing teenager. As daylight began to fade, the search became increasingly challenging and dangerous. The wooded, marshy area around the fishing site was difficult to navigate in the growing darkness, forcing the official search to be suspended until morning. However, 2 brothers who lived nearby and were familiar with the area decided to continue the search. After about 45 minutes of searching, their persistence led to a heartbreaking discovery. One of the brothers spotted a mass sticking out from a shallow pool of water. They approached it and realized that it was Dany's lifeless body. As investigators processed the crime scene, they stated that it was clear the girl had been the victim of a brutal attack. The position of her body and other evidence at the scene suggested that she had been dragged and deliberately concealed in this spot. Furthermore, the initial examination revealed signs that she had been assaulted before her death. The cause of death was initially difficult to determine due to the condition and position of the body. Dany's body was then sent to the Montana State Crime Lab for a thorough autopsy. Foreign DNA was discovered, providing investigators with a potential link to her attacker. Additionally, the autopsy revealed the presence of muddy material in her stomach and airways, which would help paint a picture of the moments leading up to her death. The state medical examiner, Gary Dale, initially concluded that Dany had drowned and listed the manner of death as undetermined. This classification would later become a point of controversy and criticism in the handling of the case. Some investigators believed from the start that the case should have been immediately classified and investigated as a murder. Dany's sister has been vocal about the family's experience with law enforcement during the initial investigation. According to her, the family was led to believe that her sister's death could have been accidental. She stated, "What my parents took away from the law enforcement investigation was, well, it could have just been an accident." This interaction created a sense of distrust between the family and the sheriff's department that would persist for years. The then Sheriff Bill Slaughter made public statements that further fueled the controversy. In one instance, he was quoted as saying, "I think we've got to be prepared for the fact that this may have been an accidental drowning." These statements were made early in the investigation and were seen by some as premature and potentially misleading. Perhaps one of the most pointed critiques came from former Sheriff's Detective Cindy Botek. Cindy, who began her career in law enforcement just days before Dany's body was discovered, has been outspoken about the apparent lack of priority given to investigating the death as a homicide. She highlighted a crucial piece of evidence that she believes should have immediately signaled foul play. People drown all the time, and what's in their body? There's water in their lungs. That's what you find. What did we find in Danielle? A stomach full of mud. That doesn't happen in a drowning. Who swallows mud? Furthermore, she reported facing obstacles when she attempted to reinvestigate the case around 2006 after joining the detective unit. Cindy claimed that she received pushback from her superiors and was stonewalled by former investigators who had worked on the case. It wasn't until further examination of the evidence that it was revealed that sexual assault was involved. Investigators added that the position of the girl's clothing was described as odd, suggesting a struggle or hasty attempt by the perpetrator to redress the victim. In August 2013, nearly 27 years after Dany's death, Sheriff Dan Springer changed the official manner of death from undetermined to homicide. This change was based on a re-examination of the evidence by private investigator Tom Elfmont and the discovery of DNA on the victim's underwear. Fast forward to 2024. The case saw a major breakthrough after nearly 3 decades of frustration and dead ends. A series of technological advancements and dedicated investigative work finally led to a lead that would bring closure to the case. The key to the breakthrough was the physical evidence from the original crime scene. 4 rootless arm hairs found on Dany's body had been carefully preserved in the evidence file for 28 years. The investigation team sent these hair samples to Astria Forensics, a forensic genome sequencing lab. The lab was able to generate a detailed genetic profile from this limited and degraded sample. Once the DNA profile was obtained, it was entered into the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. This database contains DNA profiles from criminal offenders and crime scenes across the United States. However, the initial search yielded no matches, indicating that the perpetrator's DNA was not in the system. Undeterred by the lack of a match, the investigators turned to an innovative approach: forensic genetic genealogy. The DNA profile generated from the hair samples was then sent to Parabon Nanolabs in Virginia, where officials narrowed their search down to a 55-year-old man named Paul Hutchinson from Dillon, Montana. On July 23, 2024, investigators conducted a crucial interview with Paul. The interview, which lasted nearly 2 hours, took place at Paul's own home in Dillon. During the questioning, he exhibited signs of extreme nervousness. He was observed sweating profusely, scratching his face, and even chewing on his hand. A particularly telling moment came when he was shown a photograph of Danielle. Upon seeing the image of the victim, Paul visibly slumped in his chair and showed signs of significant discomfort. These physical reactions, while not conclusive evidence, were highly suggestive to the trained eyes of the investigators. After the interview concluded, officials continued to observe Paul's behavior. They noted that upon release, his demeanor appeared erratic, further raising their suspicions. In the early hours of July 24th, just 10 hours after the interview, Paul made a distressing phone call to the authorities. He stated that he needed help, but then abruptly ended the call. Responding officers found him on the side of a road, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The suicide, while unfortunate, was seen by investigators as a tacit admission of guilt. Sheriff Dan Springer later stated that they had received confirmation that the DNA evidence was a complete match to Paul Hutchinson, solidifying their belief that they had indeed identified Dany's killer. On February 15, 1974, a disturbing discovery was made in the quiet rural community of Springbrook Township in Dunn County, Wisconsin. The body of Mary Kathleen Schlaw, a 25-year-old woman from Minneapolis, was found at an intersection near 48th Avenue and 99th Street. This finding marked the beginning of a case that would remain unsolved for 5 decades. Mary was a graduate student at the University of Minnesota and had embarked on what should have been an exciting journey. An aspiring artist with a bright future ahead of her, she had decided to hitchhike from Minneapolis to Chicago to attend an art show. This practice, while considered risky by today's standards, was not uncommon in the 1970s. Many young people saw hitchhiking as a viable mode of transportation that was safe enough. On the cold and snowy day of February 15th, Mary set out on her journey. The exact time she left Minneapolis and the details of her initial leg remain unclear, as no witnesses came forward with information about her departure or early stages of her trip. What is known is that somewhere along her route, Mary encountered her killer. In her autopsy, it was revealed that she had been stabbed multiple times with wounds indicating a frenzied assault. Particularly telling were the defensive wounds found on her hands, suggesting that she had fought desperately for her life against her attacker. The location where her body was discovered provided some clues to investigators. The intersection where she was found was not a typical drop-off point for hitchhikers, suggesting that her killer had deliberately chosen this isolated spot. The area, surrounded by fields and woods, would have provided privacy for the perpetrator to carry out the crime and dispose of the body. One of the key pieces of evidence found at the crime scene was a stocking cap. At the time, investigators recognized its potential importance, but could not have foreseen how crucial it would become in eventually solving the case. The cap, presumably belonging to the killer, contained hairs that would later prove invaluable in DNA analysis. The discovery of the body was made by a local resident named Dany Anderson. Anderson was driving by the area when he noticed something unusual in the snow. When law enforcement arrived, he was able to provide key information that was vital for the early stages of the investigation. Approximately 3 hours after Mary was believed to have left Minneapolis, Anderson briefly drove down a dead-end road and witnessed what appeared to be 2 people fighting. At first, he thought nothing of it and moved along. Later on, he revisited the location, and that's when he saw Mary's body. Anderson shared that the man she was seen with was driving a gold-colored compact car, but when he returned to the location, both the man and the vehicle were missing. Investigators noted that Mary was dressed in a maroon turtleneck and blue-dyed socks when her body was discovered. However, key items were missing, including her coat and purse. This suggested that the killer might have taken these items either to remove evidence or as trophies. The crime scene investigation was thorough, but many questions remained unanswered. Fresh snow had obscured some potential evidence, such as clear tire impressions. Nevertheless, investigators took photographs and samples from the area, hoping that advances in forensic technology might one day make this evidence more valuable. In addition to the physical evidence, investigators worked on developing a suspect profile based on the limited information available. The eyewitness description provided some details. The suspect was described as approximately 6 feet tall, weighing about 180 pounds, with a thick mustache and hazel eyes. This description was circulated widely in hopes of generating leads. The Dunn County Sheriff's Office took the lead in the investigation, but quickly realized the need for additional resources. They enlisted the help of the Wisconsin Division of Criminal Investigation, recognizing that the case might have implications beyond county lines, especially given Mary's journey from Minneapolis. Investigators pursued several avenues of inquiry in these early stages. They interviewed residents in the Springbrook Township area, hoping to find someone who might have seen the victim or the suspect's vehicle. They also reached out to law enforcement agencies along the potential route from Minneapolis to Dunn County, checking for reports of similar incidents or sightings of a young woman hitchhiking in the days following the discovery of the body. Law enforcement issued a nationwide alert and distributed posters with Mary's photo and details of the case, hoping to generate leads from a wider area. They recognized the possibility that the killer might have fled the state, or that crucial witnesses might be found outside of Wisconsin. For the next 50 years, her case remained unsolved. During this time, detectives from various agencies received and followed up on numerous leads and tips. Multiple interviews were conducted, yet no viable suspects were identified. As DNA technology advanced, evidence was repeatedly examined and re-examined. The case cycled through different investigators as they retired, ultimately returning to the Dunn County Sheriff's Office in 2013. The Dunn County Sheriff's Office made a pivotal decision to partner with the Investigative Genetic Genealogy Center at Ramapo College in New Jersey. If you recall, among the items collected in 1974 was a stocking cap. DNA was extracted from hair samples that were preserved from the cap, which allowed for a DNA profile to be developed. As the investigation progressed, the team encountered a significant challenge. The suspect's DNA led them to a family tree, but the individual they were looking for didn't seem to fit into it in an obvious way. This led to the hypothesis that the suspect might have been adopted, adding an extra layer of complexity to the genealogical research. Another breakthrough came when the investigators identified a potential lead, John Keith Miller, born on May 2, 1940. The genealogist hypothesized that Miller had been adopted from the family they had initially identified through their research. They also discovered that Miller had a daughter who was officially labeled as T.E. On November 4, 2024, investigator Dan Westland from the Dunn County Sheriff's Office spoke in person with T.E. at her residence in Unsolved, Minnesota. T.E.'s mother, R.D., was also present during the interview. In a crucial development, the daughter agreed to upload her genetic profile for the Ramapo College team to review and compare with the suspect's profile. Upon analyzing it, officials made a startling discovery. They determined that the profile obtained from the stocking cap belonged to T.E.'s biological father. They also confirmed that her biological father was indeed John Keith Miller, and her mother verified that she had been married to Miller from 1973 through 1977. On November 7, 2024, investigators traveled to Awana, Minnesota, to interview the now 84-year-old John Miller. Initially, Miller denied any knowledge of the homicide. However, when confronted with the DNA evidence linking him to the crime scene, his demeanor reportedly changed. According to investigators, he then confessed to his involvement in Mary's murder. He admitted to picking up the woman while she was hitchhiking and asking for contact. When Mary refused his advances, Miller allegedly retrieved a knife he had hidden in the car and fatally stabbed her in the back. He also admitted that the cap found at the scene was his, saying he must have lost it while carrying out the crime. Following his confession, Miller was arrested and initially held at the Steele County Jail in Minnesota. Given that this case was only recently solved, the legal side of it has yet to be fleshed out. Currently, he is in custody and awaiting extradition from Minnesota to Wisconsin to face the murder charge in Dunn County. A $1 million cash bond has been set for Miller, and he made his first court appearance on November 13th, with a hearing scheduled for November 21st. However, there doesn't seem to be any information available regarding it as of now. If you found this case as chilling and fascinating as we did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay updated on our latest videos. We delve deep into unsolved mysteries and bring you stories that you won't find anywhere else.